Welcome to Vet Life Reimagined. Many of our guest stories involve unexpected life events, and they discuss how that impacts their veterinary career. This one is no different. Dr. Andrew Cicilline decided to serve in the military as a veterinarian, and he shares what that was like, both the challenges and advantages. But what continues to be a heartthread in Dr. Andrew's life is the impact of caring for a medically complex child, little Ethan. To build a supportive community during that time, Dr. Andrew developed a well-known Instagram following under the name The OK Vet. We also discussed Dr. Andrew's involvement in supporting telehealth programs to support the war in Ukraine, as well as current projects like Serenity Vet, a relief platform aimed at providing innovative solutions to relief work. Our conversation highlights the importance of understanding and handling grief while balancing a demanding veterinary career. This is an under-discussed topic, so I'm glad to share Dr. Andrew's important story. So let's get to the conversation with Dr. Andrew. When did you know that you were interested in veterinary medicine?
Yeah, I think we get asked that question a lot as veterinarians, and I can't think of a specific moment where I was like, this is when I decided to be a veterinarian. I just can't think of a time where I didn't want to be that. It was always what I wanted to be, which is a very classic story for veterinarians. And yeah, so no specific moments, just from as far back as I can remember, that's all I wanted to do.
Yeah. Did you grow up with a lot of animals or?
I actually didn't. Definitely had that family where my dad was like, no pets. Like we had one cat that my sister got for her birthday before I was born and like lived all the way until I was in college. And we got one dog when I was like 8 or 9, maybe. And that's all I had growing up.
Okay. Maybe there was some rebellion of, no, you didn't let
Oh,
me have pets, so I'm going to go have them
that
all.
was it for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you got into school, like college, and you were, doing studies and everything, did you have an idea of what your career might look like? Did that change at all as you started to get into vet school?
Yeah, man. I think in undergrad, it was just so intensely focused on just getting in that I didn't really have a lot of thought into like what would I do when I graduated because it's just so hard, right? So I was just so focused on doing well in school, trying to get that experience, trying to balance having, probably a little bit too much fun in college. So I didn't really have an idea of what I would do. And then in vet school, it's pretty much always going to be focused towards small animal medicine and had an interest in the military kind of from the start. It's probably one of the few things I didn't rebel against my dad pushing me towards. He really recommended it and it certainly made sense from a student loan standpoint. But I applied for the scholarship my first year of vet school and didn't get accepted for it. And then I didn't get a chance to apply again until my final year of vet school. And so I found out that I was accepted probably like 6 months before I graduated. Probably should have been making some different plans if that didn't go through, but I hadn't really done that yet. So I'm sure I would have ended up in small animal practice somewhere in Ohio after graduating, but made it into the Army. And that was my next step upon graduation.
So I'm curious, is your father familiar with the military, or he just likes the financial aspect of it?
He was in the reserves, Army reserves as an infantry officer. So he had familiarity. We weren't a like active duty military family moving around. A lot of his brothers were also in the military, like served in Vietnam and just really advocated for it as a good career path.
Excellent. What was your expectation with the military, and how did that kind of come to fruition as you started to get more involved?
Hmm. I don't know what my expectations were. I certainly thought it would be different and that I'd have to travel around a lot. And that certainly was it. I think I expected to be doing more clinical medicine than I ended up doing, certainly with working dogs. And while you certainly have a working dog component that you care for, it's not really enough to keep you busy from day to day, except for a select few jobs in the military. And I think a lot of people that go from vet school into the military struggle with that aspect, that you're just not doing as much clinical medicine as you would like to. It made it hard to get better as a veterinarian because be like, okay, I'm on clinics for like 2 weeks. And then for 2 weeks, I have to go do food inspection. And then I'm in the field doing military training for another week or two. And then I might be back in the clinic again for a week. And then now I have to go travel to this training. It just was really hard to get a lot better as a clinician because it was so stop and start. I wasn't doing it all day, every day. So that was a challenge in the military for sure.
Yeah. So I'm sure you get asked by pre-vet and vet students on like what's it like, what to expect. I have no idea. So I almost don't even know what questions to ask other than I know that originally you said you had planned to like stay in for 20 years and
Mhm.
retire. So it sounds like there are some options, but what does it look like for someone who is thinking about military, the financial aspect of it is terrifying to see, especially now. I think it gets more and more expensive as we go, vet school and how the military is willing to help support that. So, what does it look like from a financial aspect? What are some of the requirements? Are there options? What is life like? Are you around other veterinarians? Like, do you mind just kind of sharing that picture?
Yeah, I think the hard part about sharing that picture is it can look so different based on where you get assigned and what job you're doing. But in general terms, the financial aspect, the best option is if you can get accepted for the scholarship while you're in school. They don't do anything more than a 3-year scholarship, so you'd have to pay for a first year. But then if you get accepted, the next 3 years will all be paid by the military, and they'll give you a stipend while you're in school for like your cost of living. So there's really not a better deal out there that I can think of. And that's why I was a little disappointed I didn't get that. But if you don't, you can still get a decent loan repayment. I'd have to check and see if it's changed. But when I entered, it was 120,000 of loan repayment, paid 40,000 per year. That still gets taxed, which for me was the majority of my loans these days. I know people are touching like 300, 400,000, and so it's not as big of an impact. But there are opportunities to get additional loan repayment throughout your career. They often will offer more to like sign on for more years. So that initial commitment is usually 3 or 4 years of active duty and then 4 years of what's called the individual ready reserves. So you'd have to do 4 years in the Army. And then 4 years, you can choose to be in the reserves or you can choose to not be active in the reserves, but they could technically call you up at any time. So it's considered an 8 year commitment. In terms of what it looks like in the military, like I said, it can vary a lot. The Army, right around the time I joined in 2011, started their version of an internship program, kind of like a first year experience to kind of help with some of the challenges of people going from vet school and then getting thrown into a remote assignment as their first job. And they're trying to figure out the military and medicine at the same time while being fairly isolated from family. That was really hard on people. And so I think it was a good move on their part. So that first year, you're going to be with a cohort of other people that graduate at the same time, generally 4 to 6 other people, and you'll have some mentorship throughout that first year. So that's really nice. And then things can really go 1,000 different ways from there. And I wouldn't say you have choice in the matter in terms of where you go, but you do get input. So the assignment list will come out, and now they've actually changed it where you like interview with the different locations and you kind of like go through an application process rather than just what we call human resources command, just filling in numbers and deciding where you go. I think the intent was to make it a little more fair. I'm not sure if that's working, but at the end of the day, you may just have to go somewhere. And I think we all experience that if you're in long enough. You're just not going to win on every assignment. And that certainly happened to me ending up in South Korea, which was definitely not what I wanted at the time. So there's some input, but I wouldn't say a lot of control over what you get to do.
Got it. And that makes sense. I mean, it is the military and you never know what's going to be needed. And you also mentioned that you have some really interesting stories and you could really excite somebody and with the acknowledgement that those things are probably more like 5% of the job, but
Mhm.
it's still fun to hear. So I'm curious, what are some of like the things that you most enjoyed doing this work?
I think, one of the most fun things, you just get to meet so many different people. Like, I think if I hadn't gone into the military, I would have stayed in Ohio, which is where I grew up, like maybe in Cleveland, maybe in Columbus, where I went to Ohio State, and certainly would have had a group of friends, but just it would have been a lot more narrow. So the opportunity to move every 3 years and meet a bunch of new people, experience a new location was a really awesome part of the job. That also gets tiring, right? Because you get used to a place and then you have to start all over. So as you get older, I think it gets harder. Some of the cool things that I did, I mean, I went to airborne school, so I learned how to jump out of airplanes, which is weird thing to be doing as a veterinarian. And it was really fun to learn how to do it. It was not really that fun to like have to maintain status as airborne because you have to keep jumping. Because if you stick around long enough, you see people get hurt repeatedly, and it's not something you want to keep doing. I think, one of my favorite stories of the military, just like such a unique experience, is I was sent to sub-Saharan Africa for some training missions. And I was in Niger, which is not a country too many people would visit. And I was in a pretty remote location, where I was just sitting around. We weren't ready to do the training mission yet. And one of the guys there was like, "Hey, do you want to I can take you off our installation and show you some really cool stuff." And I'm like, "Okay, we're in the middle of the desert. I don't know what cool could be out here, but sure, let's go look at some camels or whatever." And so he drives me out, not very far off from where we were, to this like rock formation that's in the sand. And we go in there and there's just all these drawings of like giraffes and different animals on there that were from probably like, I'm going to make up a number, like 7,000 years ago. And he just like starts crawling in the sand and he's like starts handing me these little like arrowheads. And I'm just amazed by this experience, thinking like how many people have actually seen this. There's nobody that really lives anywhere close to there. Like there's just such a cool thing to experience.
That does sound really cool. And so, in these unique places, how often do you come across unique animals, either just to see or that might also need your help too?
You know, the assignments I didn't necessarily run into a lot. The most unique thing being camels when I was in, Chad and Niger, and thankfully had local like veterinary medical professionals helping me because I didn't necessarily know how to treat camels. But I certainly had friends that, ended up in other locations that might experience different animals, but I never really got that experience myself.
That's kind of neat to be able to meet veterinarians in some of these unique places as well. Did you get to talk with them at any depth or learn more about being a veterinarian in a different country?
Some, it was a little hard in Africa because it had to be through a translator, but I did do training in Eastern Europe and Lithuania and worked with a veterinary team there. And I went back 4 or 5 times and just became really good friends with them and understanding how things were similar and different. I would say it was more similar than different, honestly. But having that like instant connection with people because we're in the same profession was really cool.
Yeah, I can imagine that. So you talked a little bit about some challenge when it came to getting mentorship. Was that mainly around the like veterinary clinical skills? Did you feel like maybe there could have been a little more mentorship around some other aspects of just kind of living a veterinary life in a military way?
Yeah, I would say mentorship wise, I think it was okay from a leadership standpoint and like adjusting to the army. And at least that first year, I had really good clinical mentorship. The military is good at giving people advanced training. So there's a handful of people that have been through residency training, and there's almost always someone available to call, maybe not necessarily directly on your site. But where I started having challenges and why I ultimately left was just some leadership conflicts, mostly with people that I wasn't directly working for, but mostly within the human resources command or other positions to affect your career trajectory. But I think it just got a little exhausting to kind of be misled and felt kind of used to get what they wanted, and they promise things and then it doesn't follow through, and that just gets tiring in a career. And that's ultimately why I left active duty.
Yeah, no matter what setting that technically could happen is, leadership and challenges there. So, yeah, that nobody likes not being in control of one their career, but poor leadership, where you don't feel like you're heard is really difficult. Now, I do know you said that you're still in the National Guard, correct?
I am. So I'm in the Utah National Guard for about another month, and then I retire.
Oh, okay. Congratulations. Now, how do you, because you were in the military still for quite a few years, how did you start transitioning back into more of a, oh, what is that called? When you are
Civilian.
civilian. There we go. See? Yes, a civilian life.
Yeah, I mean at the time my last assignment on active duty was in Korea. It helped to come back to a strong economy, so it was easy to find a job. And I had a location to come back to in Colorado Springs because at the time I was married and my ex-wife hadn't gone with me to Korea. She was still in Colorado. And so I came back here. And truthfully, life was just pretty chaotic at the time because my wife was pregnant with our first child, which, if anyone follows my story, knows was fairly complicated. So the focus was really on that. I didn't have a lot of thought into like, oh, I'm leaving the military and now I'm a civilian. Like I was just had like the next phase of my life to focus on. And I think the fact that I was staying in the National Guard made it a little bit easier because there is a sense of camaraderie that people get in the military that I think is a lot of people struggle with when they leave. And I still had that on a part-time basis, which I think helped a lot.
I can imagine that going out of that, you don't have that support system as built up. And then you mentioned social media. And so you're the okay vet on social media. And so it sounds like this might be a good time to ask you a little bit about that. Where did that title come from? And why did you decide to start posting on social media?
Sure. I think the name came from just like a life philosophy of mine of especially being a general practitioner of just be okay with being okay. And to me, it's a healthy outlook. It's not a negative to say like I'm just okay. Like as a general practitioner, there's just too many things we have to do. It's impossible to be good or great at everything. And some things we're just going to be okay at it. It doesn't mean we don't try to be better and, spend the time to look things up, but you're just never going to be great at all the things we're expected to do. So being okay with it, I think actually helps your mental state and emotional well-being personally. So that's why I go with that. And I say it all the time. Like I really am like just okay. Like, yeah, I have a few things I'm much better at. Like dentistry is a specialty of mine. I'm really good at that. But most other things, like, I'm just okay. I'll put the work and the effort in, but in terms of clinical skills, I'm okay. And I'm okay with that. Then your other question was why I started social media.
Mhm.
I would say it wasn't super intentional. Like it wasn't intended to grow what it came into. I kind of started it more planning just to share my experience with my son at the time and try to develop a community around that because it was a fairly isolating event. It was during COVID, which was isolating in and of itself. And also just caring for a medically complex child is very isolating because almost the entirety of your focus is just on caring for him or her. So I was really looking for that community and, didn't really know what I was doing with social media. Didn't necessarily focus down my content. So it was partly sharing him and still sharing veterinary medicine. And so I ended up developing a really strong community on there within veterinary medicine that has really helped me a lot and still does to this day. I mean, I think it's so fun going to a conference and like running into people you've never met, but you've been friends in a way on social media for forever. So that's really cool. And it just kind of also became this like creative outlet for me. I've pretty much most of my life been like the very serious military guy and like play sports, don't participate in art. And so it was really fun to kind of have this creative outlet to show. I have kind of a, weird, sometimes dark sense of humor, which isn't necessarily uncommon in veterinary medicine that comes out on social media. And so it's been fun in that way. And now it's kind of, it's morphed into almost a job in and of itself.
I hear ya. We were talking about podcast editing before. So, well, and you mentioned this being around the time of the pandemic. And I think probably a huge time where people in general, but I think especially in our profession, we're dealing with a lot. And it's not hard to feel isolated in veterinary medicine. Sometimes it's a few doctor practice. You're not all practicing at the same. If you are, you're seeing different, you know, it's just a little bit different. And so I think that was a really neat outcome for you for creating a community like that, because I'm sure other people really appreciate it. Now, just for those who may not be as familiar, do you mind sharing a little bit more about the story around your son?
Yeah, absolutely. I love talking about him. So his name's Ethan, and complications developed during pregnancy while, I was in Korea, she was in Colorado, and, first ultrasound was completely fine. And second ultrasound, just, I think we've all kind of heard the similar story of just kind of some silence and you just kind of get this feeling like something's wrong. I wasn't there. So it's just being shared with me. And they were like, yeah, we noticed some potential complications. We need to refer you. This was on Fort Carson. So through the military, refer off post to a civilian provider for additional imaging. And we were kind of like, oh, okay. Had to wait a few weeks before we could be seen, not really knowing what to expect. And then it was just kind of a lot of chaos from there. And that initial ultrasound, they were really worried and talking about like having to do surgery in utero, cardiac surgery, and like sent my wife up, that wife at the time, up to Denver. And this is all occurring at like 2 o'clock in the morning or some absurd hour in Korea because of the time difference. And so I'm constantly getting these phone calls, and not to go into too much details, but there were a lot of medical appointments, never really figured out what exactly was wrong, never had any surgeries during the pregnancy. And it definitely, I was already pretty sure I was leaving the military, but it's solidified like the need to leave because we didn't really know what to expect. And being able to like move around and go to different assignments and care for a medically complex child is really challenging. So I got back from Korea 2 weeks before he was born. Probably like the day after I got back, she was hospitalized and kept in the hospital until the birth, which was planned for 10:10 at 9 a.m. In like, I think the time of his birth was like 9:02 or 9:03. Like they were done like that. And we still didn't even know what to expect when he was born because none of the doctors really knew, didn't even know if he would survive the birth. And there was kind of like this calm before the storm. The first like 2 days, he was seemed to be doing okay. And one doctor even was going to send us home. And thankfully, another doctor came in and was like, nope, that's not happening. You guys need to go to the NICU, which was in a different facility, connected, but had to move over to a different hospital. I'm glad we did because a lot of complications developed. To kind of give the shorter story, after about 4 or 5 months, we finally got some genetic testing that confirmed he had a genetic defect in what's called his RPL10 gene, which there's only like a couple cases out there. So it doesn't have any like name or anything, but essentially just caused a lot of developmental problems. So he had multiple brain abnormalities, kidney abnormalities, lung abnormalities, heart abnormalities. So just a lot of stuff. Spent his first 4.5 months in NICU, and then went home and ended up back in the NICU. And it took us a really long time to get him doing better, but eventually he did. And we had some really amazing times with him. Anybody that follows my social media, or if you don't, I definitely recommend hopping on there and seeing some of the videos and pictures I've posted of him. Yeah, the best smile and the best hair. He loved having books read to him and just hanging out with mom and dad and the dogs. So he was this amazing kid. Extremely grateful for the time that we had with him. It was definitely very stressful. It was like medicine all the time, trying to go to work in veterinary medicine and then leaving and either being in the hospital, caring for him with doctors, talking to doctors and nurses, or caring for him at home. It was just like 24/7 medicine that kind of got pretty draining. And then unfortunately, he had complications from all his different diseases and passed away in 2022. And, I was there when he passed and having to see them do CPR. And we actually had to do CPR on him once ourselves at home due to an episode. And it's just made being around veterinary medicine difficult for me ever since then. I've been able to do it. I still do clinical medicine, but it's not something I enjoy as much anymore, especially the routine stuff is easier to handle, but being around like emergencies and things like that definitely are tougher. And trying to figure out how to best navigate that in veterinary medicine has been a challenge and something I'm working on. And I think talking about it helps. And hopefully someday I can provide help for others struggling with a similar thing. I don't think it's unusual for not just veterinary, but medical professionals in general to struggle with how to manage their own grief while working in their job because we're around loss all the time.
Yeah. And when we come back to that, because I think that is if I may call it a passion project right now, is learning more about grief and how we can best handle it. I had a conversation just earlier today with someone who is a coach and talking about some of the things that's unique to the people who are attracted to veterinary medicine is we often think, well, I'm just going to handle everything myself. I made it through vet school. I made it through this career. I can handle everything else. And it's just not always the case. And it's so wonderful of you to be open to helping other people with this because I mean, I'm a newer parent. I have a 7-month old and there's nobody who can fully understand, I'm sure, the loss of a child than someone else who has gone through it. And so I think going back to your willingness to start a community of people that need support, I think is really great because that's what people are going to need. And so you mentioned you needed something different at this time. You needed to get away from such direct medicine so often. And I think there was also some interests and flexibility, especially supporting your son at the time as well. So I know you started a master's program and you found a nonprofit, which was still a lot of medicine though, I think. So do you mind sharing just a little bit about kind of the career journey, trying to figure out like what's going to really work best for me that I can thrive and still get, do what I would like to do with a career?
Yeah, I think getting back to the career journey, when I initially left the military, I started working at Banfield to start because I figured it provide a lot more flexibility than like working for a private practice, which is what I needed to be able to care for Ethan. And it definitely provided that. But what I found difficult was just the overwhelming guilt whenever I would have to, like, something would happen with Ethan. And so I need to take the day off from work to be with him or take him to the hospital or something. And just the impact that has on everybody else. I think we all experience that when a vet calls out. Now you've got 20 appointments that you have to try to spread around with everybody else or cancel and reschedule, and it just causes a lot of chaos. So that was hard. And so I was like, I think I probably need to look for a different option. And thinking to my military time, one of the things I enjoyed was the leadership aspect of it, and felt like not all the time we all aren't perfect in our leadership, but a lot of times I felt like I succeeded from that standpoint and started looking for those types of opportunities, but was really restricted because I lived in Colorado Springs, couldn't really move with Ethan. It's not the biggest town, so a lot of those opportunities weren't there. So I chose to do a master's at the time in organizational leadership to kind of enhance my resume, if you will, and also just my understanding, take some of that experience I learned in leadership and have like add it to a foundational knowledge of leadership to make myself more competitive for positions in the future. And so I did that, completed a master's in organizational leadership, but right around the same time I started it, an opportunity dropped in my lap with a rescue in town called the National Mill Dog Rescue, and decided to start as the medical director there. And it was amazing. It helped with that problem of, you know, we did a lot of medicine, like you said, surgeries and dentistry. But if I needed to take the day off, it wasn't this like end of the world scenario. Like the dogs just went back to the kennel and we'd take care of them the next day or 2 days from then, which really helped to relieve a lot of stress. It also really helped me get a lot better at, my surgeries and dentistry because I was doing it all day, every day. So it was a really cool job. They were super supportive of my situation. Like, I still do some fundraiser things to help raise money for them because I just don't know that I could have gotten through such a hard time as easily as I did without them. They were truly incredible. And obviously their mission is great. Like they rescue specifically from puppy mills all across the country. So I was there for 4 years, and eventually that just like heavy clinical load did take a toll. I always think back to when I started back after Ethan's passing. I only took probably about a week and a half off because I just couldn't sit at home. It's just my personality. I needed to be doing something. And like the second day back, we had a patient crash under anesthesia, and I was like finding myself doing CPR on that dog. And I still don't know that I've really addressed that scenario, like, and dealt with it emotionally. It was just like so traumatizing to be doing that like so shortly after Ethan passed. And I definitely have that personality where I tend to shove things down and not deal with it. And I feel like that's what I did at the time just to be able to get through it. So just continuing to do medicine all day, every day, what was kind of wearing me down a bit and needed to look for something different. And so I moved on and now I'm doing other stuff.
Yeah, it sounds like Ivan Zach may have looped you into a few shenanigans, as I not surprising of Ivan. So, do you mind
Yeah.
sharing a little bit about how you met Ivan and some of the things you helped him do?
Yeah. Two different times where I kind of got looped in with Ivan. The first was actually while I was still at the National Mill Dog Rescue and was just looking for other opportunities, came across Galaxy Vets and just really connected with his ideas around what veterinary medicine should look like. We were very much on a similar plane with that, but there wasn't the opportunity I needed for like a full-time job yet. And when the war broke out in Ukraine, he reached out to me and asked if I would help him start like a foundation to provide telehealth to pet owners in Ukraine in response to the war. And so it was like a part-time thing. So I continued to work at the Mail Dog Rescue and worked with some of his people both in Ukraine and in different countries to stand this up. And we reached out to the veterinary community across the entire world for volunteers to help do this. I don't specifically remember the numbers. I think we probably had like 250, 260 different volunteers across like probably 12 or 13 different countries. So it was a really cool project. Helped, I don't even know, thousands of pet owners to the best of our ability. We kept it going for, I'd say like a year and a half. Eventually it was hard to maintain momentum and keep volunteers engaged. But I really think it proves a really valuable model for like emergency disaster response because really bad earthquake or hurricane or whatever, it's going to take some time for boots to be on the ground. But people need help immediately. And typically, one of the first things up is internet. So you could stand up a telehealth response in the initial wave of a disaster until all the resources are brought in. And I think that the sustainable model that you could do doesn't work well over 6 months or a year, but it worked well for a few weeks.
Yeah, which, like you said, that may be some of the most crucial time because it's so hard to get people there that, and people are desperate and scared and don't know what's going on. And I mean, I'm just trying to think. I wouldn't even know where to begin. Did you work through military, government? How did you even start to reach out to people?
I mean, thankfully, Ivan being from Ukraine had a lot of
Oh,
connections there. And we were able to get connected with their Ministry of Health and just make sure we had permission to do this. And they were totally like, yeah, go for it. It did help. There's a lot less, regulations and restrictions. Like if a hurricane hit Florida, it'd be a lot more complicated to like make sure everybody's legally allowed to provide assistance there. But for Ukraine, they were like, yeah, thumbs up. Go ahead, like whatever help you can provide, we appreciate. So it did make it easier. But each country will provide its own different challenges, but with some persistence, there's a way. And we didn't really have the funding to like keep it going, but the intent would have been if we could stand it up as a disaster response to try to get as many of those agreements in place in advance. Like you can't wait for the disaster to hit to try to figure out how you're allowed to do this in say Florida or whatever, pick a country, Mexico. Like you need to try to set those things up in advance so that you can get rolling right away. Because otherwise, you're not going to be reacting any faster than the boots on the ground.
yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. And I guess the other thing that Ivan started to get you involved in is Serenity Vet, and I actually heard you talk about it on a podcast episode not too long ago. So where did that start, and how did you get involved there?
Yeah, he just reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to get involved in his new project, which was Serenity Vet, which is our relief platform. And I've certainly done a lot of relief work throughout my career, off and on throughout the military, and even since leaving. It is, a career path for people. Um, your podcast is really about like what all the different options there are as a veterinarian, right? And this is just one of those. A lot of people might just do a few shifts here or there, maybe to make some extra income. Some people will do it for a short period of time as they're transitioning to figure out what they want to do. And some people just love it and like that's their career and they get a lot of joy out of that. And one of the nice things is you can make a higher salary doing that because it typically pays like more per hour And so we kind of looked at the different platforms that were out there and just felt like we could do some things different and maybe offer a better solution for people. So we stood up Serenity Vet.
Yeah. So, what are some of those things that you think are unique about Serenity Vet?
Yeah, I think one of the things we added, and it can be a bit controversial, but we do have a production based bonus option where a clinic can offer a relief shift with a flat rate. You'll still get a guaranteed, minimum salary, but then at the end of the shift, they'll put in that financial information and you can potentially make more off of production if you had a really busy, productive shift. I know some people don't like production because they feel like it influences them to act in a different way or it makes them feel bad. And then, like half the people, they like it. Our stance was we really felt like this could be beneficial, especially in like urgent care and emergency, where if you're doing relief and you're agreeing to a set rate, you could really produce a lot for that hospital and miss out on a lot of income. And so to us, it provides a balance to both the clinic in terms of risk and the veterinarian, where they should be compensated for their time, right? It's not their fault if they go and work an emergency shift and no pets show up. But then if they end up being really busy, they're compensated fairly. And it doesn't hurt the clinic because, the money was made. So that's one of the things we have that's different that kind of stands out.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's options. So again, for people that don't like that approach, they don't have to. That there's other ways of doing it, which again, it can be nice. Basically, as you said, a relief vet, there is a lot of flexibility with deciding how much do you want to work, which areas do you want to work. There's a lot of things that can be good about that. There are also some cons. Maybe you're not with one clinic usually the whole time, so you may not build as many strong relationships, but maybe you get your relationships other places, right? But again, we never know what each individual needs, especially in a certain moment of their life. They may have another challenge that's happening, and that flexibility is really what the support that they need that allows them to still bring home money for the family and still deal with other things that might be going on. The other thing that I think I remember hearing you talk a little bit about is this ability for a clinic to understand how much they can afford a
Yeah.
contract veterinarian. And I think that's a really unique project because to me, it just makes it feel like a clinic is more confident in doing this. And so just everybody there it is mindset thing a little bit, right?
Yeah.
That, that everybody's just, I feel really good about this because I know I can afford to do this. So do you mind sharing a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I'm glad you brought it up. And you talk to clinics, and certainly we hear it and the feedback we get from clinics like, oh, relief vets are so expensive. Like, we're losing money on this. And so our thought was, well, we should make a feature to kind of show them that they can still maintain profits with using relief vets. And so we made a profitability calculator where clinics basically just go in and put some fairly basic financial information that's pretty easy to look up, and the system will show them basically what they can afford to pay at a range and still maintain at least some profit. So generally it gives a range from like 20% to like 0% profit. So there's certainly situations where a clinic like just needs somebody and they, as long as they break even, it's okay. And it'll give them that range and it shows up on every shift that they post. So it's not like they have to go back and look for it. As long as they put that financial information in there, when they go and post a shift, it'll show that range. And to us, it does a couple things. And it helps those clinics that maybe don't necessarily understand their finances super well, know what they can afford. But even those clinics that know their finances really well, it's just convenient to have it right there in front of you. So you don't have to keep going back and looking it up. I've definitely heard from a few vets. They're like, oh, that's just encouraging clinics to like pay us less. And what we find is the opposite is clinics learn that they can actually afford to pay more and they're more comfortable paying the salaries that relief vets are requesting because they see like, oh, I can actually afford this. Like, yeah, I might not make quite as much profit as I would from a staff veterinarian, but I can still make some and therefore it's worth it.
Yeah, and sometimes you're in a situation where if you do not have someone working that shift, you will lose money. So
Yeah.
there's that balance of, so I think that's helpful to have those financial tools to again, just make sure that everybody's winning. Everybody is comfortable and confident in supporting each other. And so I think that's really exciting. I think, there's a lot changing in the economy. And I think what some people enjoyed might be changing, and that's all normal. But I still think there's opportunity for relief vets, and there's still a lot of opportunity for innovation. So that's exciting to hear that that's going on.
Yeah, and I think we've certainly seen, like, we've not been around very long, and yet we've seen a shift in the market where we really expected when we started it'd be super easy to get clinics onboarded on the platform and post a lot of shifts. And we'd really have to be like chasing down veterinarians trying to find them. And it's been the total opposite. It's been a lot easier for us to find veterinarians and get them onboarded, and clinics have been harder. And we're just seeing that shift where there's not as much need, there's not enough availability of days that need relief coverage. So it's getting a lot more competitive. And so I think what we're going to find is that relief vets that offer more value, that they can do more procedures beyond just seeing routine appointments, whether that's surgeries, dentistry, emergency shifts, or urgent care shifts, are going to be able to get more work than those that offer less services as we get more and more competitive. And so our platform provides the tool to connect those veterinarians that offer more and be compensated fairly.
Yeah. Is there a way to be a relief vet and be able to highlight some of your unique skills? And then can the clinic have multiple options to choose from among the vets? How does that work?
It's a really good question. In terms of like how the clinic posts a shift, so they can request whether they want surgery or dentistry. Certainly, they can put if it's urgency or urgent care. And so vets that apply, if they say like, because the surgery or dentistry can be optional. If they click those off, it might actually decrease the compensation that the clinic is offering. They can basically offer a bonus on that. And we certainly see clinics, they're willing to pay more if someone comes in and says, yes, I'll do surgeries for you today. And then in terms of the veterinarian's profile, we're actually working on revamping that right now to better be able to communicate what the capabilities are. So our hope is to add like a list of, I can add in all the different procedures that I can do and kind of give an approximate time frame of what it takes me so that the clinic can build a schedule that meets my capabilities. And this was really from my own experience in relief work. Of anytime I took on a relief shift, I tended to take on ones that offer surgery and dentistry, but I'd get these calls and these texts for the week leading up, like, hey, do you do this procedure? Like, how many can I schedule for you this day? Like, how long will this take you? And now we just want to have that information there to simplify the process. We're also thinking about adding a potential like video interview from the veterinarian. We find that if people can kind of get a feel for you from a personality and culture fit, they're more likely to accept the shift, because a lot of clinics are really protective of their culture. Just because you don't fit that culture doesn't mean it's like a negative on you, but they want someone that fits. And so we feel like having a video profile would really help with that.
Yeah, that's really interesting and good for people to know. If you are interested in relief work, is this may sound scary at first, but to me, I also think about it. It's an opportunity to discover what you really enjoy doing the most and leaning into that, building up those skills. And then you can find those places that you can do more of what you like doing. And so, in a way, look at it in a positive sense. I think it's still a call to make sure that you're continuing to grow and to upskill yourself in those areas of interest. But yeah, very unique place that we are now. But yeah, it's kind of weird. Like you said, when you were leaving the military and it was a really good economy. A couple years ago, I used to say I could walk down the street to just the first vet clinic that I come to, and I would be hired on the spot. They wouldn't want me because I'm a nutritionist and I wouldn't do probably what they, they need me to do, but they would hire me up in a heartbeat. And now it's we're kind of coming back down from that spike around the pandemic. So keeping up with those things, never assuming, learning, also knowing more about yourself too. I think that's putting all of that together is, I think, the best way to grow and develop a career that you enjoy doing. So,
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
yeah. And it's also, I think, anybody who's interested in dentals, I don't really hear that often, somebody who's like, I love dentals. So good for you. I'm sure your skills are highly sought after. And I think, coming back to what we were talking about with um, you know, where you're heading next. I know you're still working on Serenity Vet, but that you are interested in maybe learning more about grief and how that can also apply to the people of veterinary medicine. So, do you want to share a little bit about kind of what you're currently working on and what you're interested to keep focusing on?
I think for now it's mostly a self exploration and reading some articles, and I have some people that can mentor me in that space to try to better understand it. And my hope is to put together maybe like a CE talk that I could provide either at conferences or online to share with others. What it grows into there is still kind of open at this time.
Yeah. You never know. When you're open to things, that's when things are able to land in your lap. So
Really.
just stay away from Ivan. No, just kidding.
I'm sure he's got another idea brewing somewhere.
Always does. Well, I have a couple of final questions for you. One is anytime I see somebody with a very unique background, I like to ask about your background. It looks like there's a bunch of medals back there. Do you mind sharing a little bit about what those are?
Sure, I can't take credit for a single one of them.
Oh,
There's, these are all my wife's medals. She ran a bunch of races, Tough Mudders, half marathons, full marathons, mostly at Disney World
yeah.
races. She lived in Florida for a long time, very much a Disney family. So those are all hers. I have a few of my own. She likes to do like the fun races where she like, walks and runs a little and like hangs out with Goofy and, takes her time. And I'm like, no, we got to be serious. Like I'm running this race. I gotta PR it. So a little bit different medals for me, but I'm trying to course her into like actually running one with me. And she's not happy about it.
So, do you have like an upcoming race or one that's really memorable that you could share?
My plan is to run a half marathon in August in Fort Collins. I don't even remember the name of the race. Just picked a date so that I could put together a training plan. Memorable races for me, I ran both the Marine Corps full and half marathon while I was in Afghanistan.
Oh, wow. I'm
Yeah.
guessing the environment was a part of that challenge.
Yes, and also just like being able to train. There's I was fortunate I was on a bit larger base in Afghanistan, but like having a safe area to run, that many miles. And then of course it's never like fully safe, right? Like anything could happen at any time. And I was in the desert area, so it was hot.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking was the heat. It's and the last question I always love to end on is what is something you're really grateful for right now?
Mm. Uh, I am grateful for the time I had with Ethan because it just has made me a better person. To see his happiness and joy through so many struggles just provides perspective and makes the challenges of life seem pretty insignificant most of the time. So just trying to carry on his legacy of happiness and strength.